Hey everybody, Jeff Schneider here. If you want to sound more modern during your solos, this video is for you. You see, a lot of the problems that arise when people improvise is that they end up playing these predictable lines. Like, take a CMaj7 for instance. Just going up and down the arpeggio, 1, 3, 5, 7, 7, 5, 3, 1. That's fine, you're outlining the chord, and you can play a lot of interesting lines with that core structure. So take this for instance. If you add the 7 below that arpeggio, that makes it a little bit more interesting. Here it is with that chord underneath. Not bad, but it still has that classic jazz sound, which is fine, but if you want to make it sound more modern, what you have to do is start messing around with the intervals. So what we have here is that basic arpeggio, and it's basic because you're just going up root position, and you end up with these thirds. Third, 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 between each one of those notes. So we have to throw a wrench in there. We have to mix it up, and instead of playing C to E, let's do C to D. Now that's more interesting. We have this second, this fourth, and then the third on top. So the interval selection is a lot more diverse now. Here's what it sounds like with the chord underneath. Already sounding a lot more modern. And we can apply the same principle to some other chord types as well. So take a minor chord. Let's use D minor, the 2 in the key of C major. A D minor, let's take that 1, 3, 5, 7 arpeggio. It sounds fine, but again, lots of thirds in there, a little bit too symmetrical for my taste. So let's instead do the same thing. Let's drop the third down to the second, and we get this sound. That's not bad, but I like the sound of the CMaj7 arpeggio better. So let's see if we can recreate that on a minor chord. So instead of playing this, let's bump it up and start on the third. So I'll take you through a basic arpeggio first. Here's the D minor arpeggio, 3, 5, 7, 9. Well, if I take the chord out from underneath there, that looks a lot like F major 7, which it is. We're just playing it over a D minor chord. Now we can apply the same thing that we did to the C major 7. Drop that third, technically it's a 5 in this case because A is the 5 in D minor, but we're going to drop it down a whole step. So now we have this sound. Cool. All right, let's do the same thing on a dominant 7th chord. Let's use the 5 chord in the key of C. By the way, if you want these chord scale charts, you can get them for free. I've linked them in the description below. I have them in all the different keys, both major and minor. It's a great resource to have, and it will really help you understand how chords and scales relate to one another. That's why I call them the last chord scale charts you'll ever need. So check them out in the link in the description. But we have this G7 chord now. Again, if we do the 1, 3, 5, 7 arpeggio, it sounds very vanilla. Let's bring that 3 down to the 2 with the chord. Not bad, but it doesn't have the same exact interval structure as our original line. So what we have to do is find a major 7 arpeggio in the context of that 5 chord, in the context of G7. So here's what we can do. When you have a dominant 7th chord, you have a lot of leeway as far as what notes you can play. That's why you have these flat 9s, these sharp 9s, all of these altered extensions. So you can kind of play any note on a dominant 7th chord and it'll sound good because there's already so much dissonance baked into the core of that chord. Meaning if I play a G7 chord, that interval between the 3rd and the 7 is a tritone. It's a very dissonant interval. So dissonance is well suited for those dominant 7th chords. So we can play a whole bunch of altered notes that wouldn't normally fit into the G Mixolydian scale. It'll still sound good even though the notes that we're about to play don't fit into that traditional scale. You'll hear what I mean in a second. Let's try playing this shape right here. Now this looks a lot like A flat major 7. If I take this B flat and I move it up here to the C, that's A flat major 7, right? But now we're going to move the C down to B flat and put that over the G7. Check out what that sounds like. So that's a very G7 altered sound right there. We've got this A flat, which is the flat 9, B flat is the sharp 9, E flat is the flat 13, and then of course G is the root on top. We can also take the same shape starting on a D flat and get this sound. Very altered. I'm using a lot of these altered extensions. D is a sharp 11. I'm sorry, this is a C sharp is a sharp 11. E flat is that flat 13 again. A flat, flat 9. C is the 4 or the 11. Again, you can pretty much get away with whatever you want on a dominant 7th chord like that, which is why that sounds cool. All right, let's go back to our original one though, the A flat, B flat, A flat, B flat, E flat, G. Let's stick with that one for now. And let's put this into a context of kind of an exercise or a line that sounds a bit more musical. Let's combine a whole bunch of these different ideas. But before we do, I want to show you another variation you can play on that 1 chord, on the C major 7. So we started with this one, which is fine, but you can also do the same shape starting on the 5 or G. You get this sound. So you have the 5, the 6, the 9, and F sharp is your sharp 11. So that gives you a little bit more color there on that C major 7 chord. Now let's combine a whole bunch of these. We're gonna do a basic 2-5-1 progression, D minor 7, G7, C major 7, and I'm gonna use these licks on all 3 of those chords. So for the D minor, we're gonna play this variation. That's starting on the 3, so 3, 4, 7, 9, back down. And on the 5 chord, G7, we're gonna do the version that starts on the flat 9, A flat. And then when we go to the 1 chord, C major 7, we're gonna take this shape and just move it down a half step, starting on G, the 5. Here it is all together. A 1, a 2, 3, 4. All right, so remember, you can play the same lick in different positions on the same chord. If you want to get really adventurous, you can start on the 3, which will give you this shape right here. And that gives you a sharp 9 on a major 7 chord, which is a little unorthodox, but you can pull it off, especially when you have this more modern shape supporting it from below. That's a sharp 9 on a major 7 chord. And a sharp 11 as well, but the sharp 9 is the weird one. You could even do the shape starting on an A, which is the 6 in C major, and that's gonna give you this sound. That G sharp is a sharp 5 on the C major 7 chord. Again, those weird notes, the sharp 9, the sharp 5, they work in unexpected places like on major 7 chords because of the more modern interval structure supporting them from below. Let's go on to that minor chord one more time. The D minor, we played this variation starting on F, which is the 3rd. You could also start on the 7, which is C. That one works too, kind of cool. And then on the 5 chord, you have a lot of different variations. If you want a less altered sound, you can start on the 5 of the 5 chord. So if our chord is G or G7, we can start on a D, which is the 5 of that chord. And then we're gonna play this arpeggio, which gives us a sharp 11, which yes, is an altered extension, but less dissonant than the flat 9 and the sharp 9. Here's what it sounds like. That sharp 11. It's a nice sound. If you want more of a sus sound, you can imply a G13 sus chord by starting on the flat 7 of the 5 chord. So again, if our chord is G7, the flat 7 is F, and you play this shape. Here it is with the chord underneath. That's G13 sus. Now, one other thing you can do with all of these variations is add the note a half step below wherever you're starting. So if you remember, when I was arpeggiating that C major 7, the normal boring version, I added that half step below. The B, the major 7. That's kind of a cool sound. And we can do the same treatment with that lowered third to the second. So the 3 goes down to the 2, and now you have this shape. We can apply that same principle to the other variations. So on the D minor, instead of this, we bring the E down below. You can play it below and above, actually. And then, of course, you can do the same thing with those 5-chord variations. So here's the G7 altered. Instead of just this, let's bring the G down the octave. That's a very cool sound. Play it in the bottom and the top. That works well too. So when you start applying these variations to the variations, you end up with a whole new vocabulary that you can mess around with. And this is a much more modern sound. Now, if you want to get even more modern with your solos, I have a whole collection of modern jazz licks, both for beginners and intermediate and advanced improvisers alike. It's part of my Sick Licks collection, which you can learn more about, linked in the description below. It's also somewhere on the screen here. And I also have another video with a whole bunch of other licks that will make your solo sound better right away. So check that out. And thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.